Hi, this is Dan Barron, Technical Service Director for New Farm, and today we're going to be talking about Cheetah Herbicide, one of the key herbicides in our portfolio. It's a critical product and it's a critical tool for many cropping systems. Cheetah is our New Farm's formulation of 2.34 pounds per gallon of glufosinate ammonium. So it's a standard formulation and has wide flexibility across a number of cropping systems. Traditionally, we'd be looking at Cheetah being used as a non-selective weed control tool in burn down, post-harvest, fallow uses, as well as many of the tree, vine, nut crops that it's labeled in. Certainly, the popularity and importance of Cheetah has grown as a resistance management tool. It's the only herbicide, obviously, that is in the Group 10 classification, so it really helps out with managing many of the resistant annual weeds. Certainly, one of the key uses is in Liberty Link as well as other glufosinate tolerant crops, and those continue to grow in importance and in market share. So along with that, we see the Cheetah growing as well. In addition, as we move outside of maybe some of these traditional markets where Cheetah has been used, we see it gaining popularity as a non-selective alternative to glyphosate and paraquat in some of the non-crop situations as well. So one of the reasons certainly for the importance of glufosinate and Cheetah is in the area of resistant weed management. Glyphosate, as we look now here in 2020, has close to 48 species, at least that have been documented. And with resistance, as compared to glufosinate, there's only 3 documented species. And so certainly that's not to say that glyphosate has lost its value. It just has had some challenges with resistance. It continues to be a key component of weed control management across many cropping systems. With glufosinate, the low number certainly is encouraging. We see that only on 3 species, and those being grass species, which is not a surprise given that in general, glufosinate's a little hotter on broadleaf weeds relative to grasses. Another point also is that certainly it doesn't mean that glufosinate is bulletproof, and it's going to require stewardship as it gains popularity and market share across a number of cropping systems, and it's going to require tank mixes, mode of action, rotation to prevent the increase of resistance that we've seen with glyphosate and other classes of herbicides. Now, with the growth of glufosinate-tolerant traits, it's really pointed out how this molecule has become an important management practice and management system in a number of situations. So these charts that I'm sharing here are from the University of Arkansas Weed Science, but it points out the number of trait platforms that now have glufosinate tolerance. So we go back to corn here, kind of the original Liberty Link was kind of step 1. Then we had stack traits with glyphosate tolerance and Liberty Link. And now we obviously have Roundup Ready 2 to yield plus Liberty Link. So we see that continuing to come along with some of the later trait generations in corn. On the cotton side, first of all, there was the glyphosate tolerance plus Liberty Link paired together. Now we have Roundup Ready XtendFlex, which brings in the dicamba, glufosinate, as well as glyphosate. So we're starting to see more herbicide options available in cotton that incorporate glufosinate. And then, of course, another important trait package is with Enlist that brings in the 2,4-D choline and also carries in not only glyphosate, but glufosinate tolerance as well. Certainly a lot of news around the soybean traits here in the past couple of years, creating options, but it does create some complexity when you look at the number of traits that are out there and the herbicide tolerance that comes to play. So at one point, obviously, we just had straight Liberty Link or the Roundup Ready to yield packages was kind of an either or world with glyphosate or glufosinate. Now with Roundup Ready Xtend, we're bringing in the dicamba, but that only has the glyphosate. Coming in the near future, it's anticipated that Roundup Ready to yield with XtendFlex will be approved, and so now we'll have glyphosate plus glufosinate in combination with dicamba tolerance. Now, Corteva has Enlist E3 that's brought in the choline plus glyphosate as well as the glufosinate trait. So we're starting to see Many situations where there's not only just the two herbicides for non-select or one herbicide for non-selective, but two non-selective options, with the Enlist E3 having glufosinate and glyphosate. In addition, recently we've had Liberty Link GT27 again, so that's a glyphosate glufosinate stack in addition to an HPPD, which is yet to be, the HPPD herbicides is yet to be approved, but we do have approval for applying both glyphosate and glufosinate in this package. And then the MGIs have yet to have approval, but that will be another package that will have glufosinate tolerance brought to the market. So when we look at labeling, many of the original glufosinate labels only specified Liberty Link herbicide tolerant crops. So just an example here is on our original Cheetah label, it would say post-emergence weed control to be applied in crop or on crops containing the Liberty Link trait. So that was an older version reflecting, the limited number of trait packages. So we've updated that, and we recently have approval. So our current Cheetah label allows for a much broader use, saying that post-emergence weed control may be applied on crops containing the glufosinate-resistant trait. So that opens up things like the E3, the Enlist E3, as well as the GT27 that has glufosinate tolerance beyond the traditional Liberty Link trait. So we can see Cheetah being used in a number of glufosinate-tolerant crops, cotton, soybeans, and corn, as well as don't forget about the Liberty Link canola as well. Now with tank mixtures for Cheetah, obviously when it comes to the dicamba and 2,4-D traits, there's a tank mix approval to ensure that tank mix partners don't affect the packages of the new trait herbicide. So with Enlist 1, Cheetah is approved as a tank mix partner across soybeans, so that's important, as well as in cotton. So the timing of this tank mix would be up to R1 in soybeans or up to mid-bloom in cotton, and these are driven by the Enlist labels. But I do want to point out, as with any tank mix, the most restrictive label determines things like pre-harvest intervals and things like that. With Cheetah, there would be a 70-day PHI for that use, be it in a tank mix or in a sequential application, for instance, on Enlist beans or Enlist cotton. So some other common tank mixtures with the E3 trait and Liberty Link GT27, we have customers as well as some folks in the seed industry, weed control specialists, looking at how do we improve the grass control of glufosinate. As I've mentioned in the past, it tends to be stronger on the broadleaves, a little less active on the grasses, especially if the grasses are getting some size to them. So in some cases, we have folks looking at things like Credit 5-4 Extra in combination with glufosinate to boost the grass control. If we're in maybe a more traditional situation on a Liberty Link without the glyphosate tolerance, in many cases, a graminicide such as a clethodim-based product can be added to improve grass control as well. Now, one of the tank mix combinations that's interesting, and New Farm actually developed a premix with glufosinate and fomeciphin in the name Cheetah Max, but it points out a tank mix with fomeciphin can really be effective. Maybe if you're spraying larger weeds, maybe having to spray during cloudy weather or things like that, and you can really boost the activity of the Cheetah when you're using a tank mix like that or any other glufosinate product. So some common tank mixes there for a soybean system. Now when we look at non-crop burn down, maybe orchard applications, one of the more popular tank mixes has been a PPO inhibitor like Goal or Goaltender in combination with Cheetah. When we get into fallow applications, those sorts of situations, a combination with Panther SC or even combinations with metribuzin have been successful as well. And it kind of points to some of the mode of action that I'll touch on here in a moment as to why certain tank mixes might be really beneficial in some of these non-selective applications. Now we do get questions around, say, the Extend Flex cotton or down the road with Extend Flex soybeans is, will we be able to mix Cheetah with things like Ingenia or Extendamax? And at the current time, any ammonium-based products, including the ammonium salt of glufosinate are not prohibited for tank mix with Ingenia or XtendiMax. And in general, I would say that's probably not a tank mix we would look at from a biological standpoint. The value when those XtendFlex traits come into play would be to apply the Cheetah separately. So you can do that separately. It's just the tank mix that that would not be approved because of the ammonium component of glufosinate. So as we look at the complexity of trait packages coming in with, the historic either glyphosate or Liberty Link, and now we have the Enlist traits and the dicamba traits coming along. There's a lot of different spray attributes and best practices for each one of those. So I think it's good to always review what conditions and practices result in optimum activity of Cheetah. So first of all, this glufosinate mode of action, this molecule is very contact in nature. So coverage is very important. So we look at 15 gallons per acre minimum. If the weeds are getting large or difficult situations, it certainly doesn't hurt to take that up to 20 GPA or larger, especially as we look at maybe in some of the fallow, non-crop, and other markets. Droplet size, I like a medium droplet size. We can go larger, especially if you've got your volumes up, but a medium droplet is ideal, and you kind of want to avoid the really large extra coarse droplets, especially if you're on the low end of the gallonage per acre. The time of day is really important for Cheetah activity. Generally, we like it at least 1 or 2 hours after dawn, and then to cut off spraying before dusk. Again, very light sensitive, and we'll talk about the mode of action here in a moment. Temperature, the warmer the better. If the weeds are actively growing and photosynthesis is going on, that's going to help accelerate the activity. High humidity also is another factor. It just tends to be much more active in high humidity conditions. As far as additives go, AMS has been a traditional recommendation for Cheetah and glufosinate. Again, that helps overcome hard water conditions that can limit activity. In addition, there's also newer adjuvant technology that can be used not only for non-selective applications, but some of the adjuvant producers and suppliers have newer technology that would be suitable for use in crop as well. That's always been a bit of a challenge, but we've kind of had some new adjuvant technology to assist in control, particularly on larger weeds, difficult conditions as well. Finally, weed size. If you look across the Cheetah label, best recommendations is to treat the weeds when they're small. Less than 3 inches is ideal, and the grasses prior to tillering. So I use that as an example, and take a look at a couple of the pictures here on the right. This is from Prevent Plant Acres in 2019. So the weed size is well beyond anything we'd typically be doing in crop or even in a burned down fallow situation. But the Prevent Plant scenarios of 2019 provided a really good illustration and an opportunity to pull out some of the best practices here. So here on the left as well as the right, mainly giant ragweed, but the size on the picture on the right, the giant rag was well beyond what we'd typically be spraying, around 3 to 4 feet tall. We used high gallonage and had very good coverage, but even then we're going to press the limits of Cheetah and glufosinate, so you can see a little bit of regrowth there. The weather conditions were great, so you notice very good desiccation and things like that, but we're really limited by the amount of coverage that we're getting there. On the right, the weed size was quite a bit smaller. Weeds maybe around 1 foot tall. Again, larger than we would typically do, but you can kind of see how things varied. And this was only about 8 days later. Sprayed in July, hot, humid conditions, but even then you're going to start to see things separate based on weed size. And you can kind of see there's a close-up of giant ragweed starting to have some resprouts. So again, it all just points back, spray the weeds when they're small. Even under ideal conditions, you want to get them at the appropriate size. Now, one of the things that's really fascinating about glufosinate is we are still learning about this mode of action. And I wanted to share some recent research by Colorado State, Dr. Hudson Tucano, and they're really digging into the physiology of how this molecule works. Again, so we've got glufosinate, group 10 herbicide, and it's actually being recategorized as in a group of herbicides that are more in line with things like the group 14s, things like flumioxazin or panther, or the group 22s like paraquat. And it may seem subtle, but we're really starting to learn much more about why we see such greater activity under high humidity, warmer temperatures, and high light conditions. So again, it's really interesting to see us learn more about this molecule and this important herbicide. And it will all benefit down the road of stewarding the product and ensuring its activity long term. And so here's kind of an example. What they're really seeing is that one of the reasons why glufosinate causes the weed to die is because of the production of these ROSs. It's a reactive oxidative species. So basically, it's the molecules that get released when a pathway is shut down, and those ROSs end up causing cell damage. It's kind of the cell death that we see and the burning effect that you see out of Cheetah or glufosinate. In addition, what work they're showing here too is that you can combine glufosinate with PPO herbicides, things like Panther, flumioxazin, or oxyflorphin, Gold, things like that. And you'll see not only the reactive oxidative species being produced by the glufosinate, but the PPO herbicides as well, which is a well-known mode of action and pathway. So you can start to think about, there's just some compelling tank mix options. I mentioned in the orchard market, things like Cheetah and Goaltender is a really common tank mix. So there's some practical uses as well to some of this herbicide physiology understanding that is really hot off the presses here in 2019 and 2020. So just to summarize, Cheetah herbicide, it's a critical tool, obviously, for managing weeds in a wide range of crops and weed management systems. There's growing use of glufosinate because of the glufosinate-tolerant cropping systems that are gaining market share. And we continue to learn about this active ingredient with recent research, and all of these things point to the ability of us to grow the importance of Cheetah and pair them with best practices that will continue to maximize its value and efficacy for a wide range of cropping systems well into the future. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us on today's webinar. And as always, if you have questions on Cheetah herbicide or any other products in the New Farm portfolio, please feel free to reach out to me or any of your local New Farm reps. Again, thank you for joining us.